Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
Hello, this is Tim Fergestad. Thank you for joining us. Vince Mathis is an Army Reserve officer, corporate analytics leader, real estate investor, and co-founder of Epic Couples, helping couples strengthen their relationships through community and retreats. Vince, welcome to the show.
Awesome. No, thanks for having me.
All right. So we were talking right before the show a little bit. I've had people on and all sorts of people you know, right? Leaders of the scouting in Arizona. The book guy I just had on, Rob yep. Odell. Those custom books and stuff for kids. Those are very cool. Do you know Scott Donnell? I'm part of his mastermind, Fig and Eagle. It's a family-oriented one. He's here in Arizona.
Yeah, the name rings a bell. Not
okay.
specific.
Oh, okay. Well, that's another sort of. He does retreats and other stuff as well. He's family-based stuff. It's not couples-based, but couples and families are very. The marriage is the foundation of the family. All right, Vince. So why don't you give us a snapshot, sort of your business right now, and then we can sort of backfill it with all how you got there.
Yeah. So I guess kind of snapshot is. I think actually the beginning is a very good place to start, right? I think that's
yep.
Lord of the Rings, right? So I grew up in a active duty Army household. My dad was in the military. So I was an Army brat, moved every couple of years, got to see some really cool places. So lived in Germany for 3 years, East Coast, so sometime in Kansas, maybe less exciting. But both my parents that whole period were great parents, but didn't always have a good marriage. A lot of communication issues, trust issues, things like that. And so that was something that kind of was impressed upon me from a young age, that I wanted more than that, right? That obviously I still want to be a good parent like they were. Like they were my cut master, my scout master, made sure we went to different castles, right, every weekend when we lived in Germany. But that, they were often, either physically or verbally fighting, just very unhealthy situation for the two of them. So growing up, kind of fast forward a little bit, met the girl who'd become my wife, Allie, at a weekend church camp while we were in high school. Followed her down to the University of Nebraska, where I got a bachelor's degree in sociology. Now, again, growing up, I kind of was active duty Army, enlisted. We were kind of lower middle class. So for me to pay for University of Nebraska, which was out of state for me, had to go into the Army myself. But my mom made sure that if I was going to do that I worked smart, not hard necessarily. And so I actually went in as a ROTC cadet. And as I came out of my degree in 2011, I commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army Reserve, specifically as an engineer officer.
Okay. And would you recommend that in this day and age?
Yeah, I think obviously seasonally or very currently there's a lot going on in the world, but it's an amazing leadership program. I think if you have the will, and you can go to universities and follow a cadet for a day, or talk to an officer, specifically in the military, if you're looking at that side of things. You can also go into the Guard Reserves as a non-officer and still get school paid for, just slightly different routes. And if you go in non-officer, you usually have only like a 3 or 4 year obligation. And don't quote me, talk to your recruiter, talk to someone at the school. But no, it's been an excellent pathway for myself. Obviously, your experience will vary, but no, so I did 10 years in the Army Reserves. Okay. I never deployed, and obviously the expectation is that you could. And I like to clarify that. I think there's certainly levels of service, and so I wanted to differentiate that a little bit. But I got to work with some amazing people, some amazing soldiers, people who were willing to do whatever it took to get the job done. And towards the end of that 10 years, it was just starting to get to where some of my next steps, if I were to move out of company command, where I was responsible for 230 soldiers in Houston, Texas, I'd be kind of on staff for the next 4, 5, 6 years. And I wouldn't be in the field, with my soldiers on the ground doing the work. And I don't necessarily like the admin side of things, which may surprise some because I work in corporate HR. But when I was doing that, as a very different part-time job. That's what I enjoyed doing. So I led an area clearance platoon where our job was deliberate demining. So finding mines, usually with non-metallic probes poking into the earth every 4 inches, driving until something blows up, all that good stuff. Blowing up bridges, building roads is kind of the mission set that we had. So yeah, not for everyone, but had a really good time doing it and got to work with some amazing people. So that was in the Army Reserve, so essentially a part-time job. When your leadership roles is a little more than the couple 1 weekend a month and a couple weeks a year, but so during that time I was also working up and it kind of changed careers a few times, but ultimately ended up in where I am now, at least as far as a practice, and that's HR analytics, so human resources analytics. So I'm HR, but I'm not the touchy-feely HR. Don't come to me because someone was mean in the break room, right? I'm looking at the bigger picture. So I work for a Fortune 300 company, 40,000 plus employees, and taking that information from our HR systems of record, plus operational systems of record, finance data, and combining that all to find trends, stories, making sure we're within certain risk tolerances for both people data and operational and financial KPIs. And so with that, I still get to lead a small but mighty team, not 230 people. I've got 5 high impact individual contributors. And during all that, so again, building this my personal career, the civilian career, building that military career for those 10 years. My wife and I also we're looking at what else is there, because again, coming from low middle income, my wife a little bit more certainly safe family as far as finances go, but we wanted to kind of build our wealth. And so one of the things we looked into was real estate. I spent probably 5-6 years. We're probably all familiar with like Bigger Pockets and all these podcasts and books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and learning all these things. And eventually came to a point where I was ready to put it into practice, but my wife had a lot of fears, a lot of concerns. That at first, as a younger husband, I didn't appreciate as well as I could have, but that things kind of turned around when we got very deliberate one day, sat down for a few hours after tucking the kids in, and had that conversation.
Okay, well, that's where some of the magic happens, right? When you get intentional with your future, right, and you put down some structure and address the fears are important. I recently had shared, I think Tim Ferriss has a good TED Talk on fear setting.
Fear setting. I've recommended that fear setting YouTube video probably a dozen times to people. It's something that we've implemented. It's something that I had actually a former junior officer of mine reach out just a couple months ago, and he was looking at making a career jump. He had gotten an offer, just off the cuff, and was looking at making a career jump. And I said, okay, like, write down everything that could go wrong. How bad would that be, and what would it take to fix it, right? And so just that fear setting exercise is huge, and it's simple. You can do it on a sheet of paper, but you walk away with going like, I know what I need to do, right?
Right. Well, goal setting seems to be a little more rational, right? And you think about what do I like and what could I do? But then actually implementing it requires motivation and is often emotionally complicated, and that's where the fear setting comes in, right? And lets you acknowledge and process those emotions into something a little more actionable. Anyway, I think it's incredibly valuable. That's cool. So how did that? So that sounds like a combination of couples training as well as real estate investing blended.
Yeah, and so that kind of started, and to give away the end. So we went from that night of a lot of concern and a lot of unknown, especially on my wife's part. And honestly, I hadn't applied any of this, so I didn't necessarily know what I was getting into. And there was a lot of lessons learned along the way. But we're to where we now have 35 units that we manage from across the country with a good team in place. And as I kind of teased when we were talking before the call, that there's been some very hard lessons learned along the way, but that these very deliberate, very intentional conversations and setting the goals for, okay, what are we going to do this year, So that my wife is on board and supportive, and just aware of the things that could come up, and how we're penciling out the plans and penciling out why these deals may or may not work. So to kind of go back to that evening after tucking the kids in, we're just sitting in the living room on our couch, and so this is I think actually second quarter, spring of 2020. All of COVID and everything is happening as well.
Oh, yeah.
So spend a lot of time just home as a family, right? Everyone did that here. And I had been on top of all the bigger pockets and everything, going through like The One Thing, right? Is another amazing book. Brandon Turner had talked about how he does goal setting with his wife, Brandon Turner, Bigger Pockets, and now he's got his whole thing going. Tribe of Millionaires, another really good one as far as some of those foundational concepts for building wealth and success, and put together
for people who may not know, The One Thing is the book by Gary Keller. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, good book.
Where kind of, if you had to boil down just fixing the one thing, right, like that would make everything else possible, right? I think it's just about the punchline there.
Helps people get some clarity on what should be the priority.
Yeah, not getting, if applied to maybe real estate, like not getting, oh, well, what would this do to my taxes? Or well, if you don't start, right, it's you're not gonna have any tax impact, and you're also not gonna make any money. Obviously, you want to be aware of a lot of those smaller things, but what's the one thing? And so it might be just, hey, like start writing offers, start underwriting deals and seeing if they make sense.
Dip your toe in.
Yeah, right. And attend meetups and talk to other people that have done it, is usually a good first one. But so taking everything I'd seen from those and making a list of questions to have as a conversation with my wife that night on what do we want for the future? We're happy, we're okay in our careers. We're good as a couple, like we were solid there. Obviously, some of that communication was still in the early process of getting stronger. But what are my goals for this year? What are your goals for this year? What do we want the kids to do? And so we had that conversation over the course of about 3 hours and left, with, I knew what I wanted to do, and that was just to buy our first property in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which is over 1,000 miles away from where we lived in Phoenix, but it's where we had family we were familiar with, and the numbers just made a lot more sense. Not just that it was cheaper, but that the rent to price ratios were a lot better than what Phoenix was already starting to see. Obviously, it shot up over the last 5-10 years.
That's why I originally invested outside of Arizona. Just the well, for people listeners who may not know, a rule of thumb is the 1% rule. For finding, you want the rent to be the monthly rent to be about 1% of the purchase price of the property. Used to be the 2% rule, by the way.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
But prices and rents in Phoenix or Arizona markets not as easy. So that's why I went into the markets as well back in the day.
Yeah. No, and I know a lot of people that have been very successful locally, whether in small properties or syndications like yourself. But ultimately, like I said, so that one we kicked off, and at the end of that year, bought our first duplex, right? And then did it again the next year. And this next year with our retreat, we wanted to be a little more intentional. We had seen the value from it that first year, even though it wasn't really a thing. It was a couple hours in one evening. We still remember that night. There was tissues, from crying and having this conversation of what we want and how much we trust each other and all this. That next year we want to be more intentional. So we actually, got the kids set up with the in-laws and flew to San Diego. Very short flight from Phoenix, but flew to San Diego. Got up in a nice hotel downtown. Had some nice meals planned. Just to be very deliberate about getting outside of our normal everyday life, where we can more abundantly. Like when you're downtown in the big metro, you're walking along the beach, and there's all these $1 million sailboats and things going by, and you're eating fresh lobster and crab and things. It's hard to have a small mindset that you might have when you're at home and you're like, oh yeah, I still have to fix the dishwasher. Oh yeah, hold on, I got to take the dog for a walk before we can come back to that.
Right.
Get yourself out of the everyday and be very intentional. Think bigger, obviously still realistic, right? Don't expect to buy a $1 billion downtown Manhattan building at the end of the year if you're making $100K a year and haven't ever bought a building before. But it feels a lot more reachable when you're doing all this. And so, like I said, 2021 went to San Diego, getting away from the normal, getting to more abundant environment. And then the next couple of years, we actually said, I guess I should say 2021, kind of building on.
This was the start of your annual retreats.
Yeah. And so the first one, like I said, couch, and then we had San Diego. That year after San Diego, we bought a fourplex, actually from the same seller as the duplex. We weren't quite ready, like having saved up enough for another down payment, but they reached out, gave us an offer for less than the tax valuation. And so then when the actual appraisal came in, it was, gosh, I think we bought it for 150 and it was worth 240, right? And so just wild, immediate equity gain. So we said, okay, we got to keep this going, right? This is just working. But we also, I was starting to get more involved in some local real estate meetups. And said, there's a lot of value to this community. That's something that I didn't appreciate maybe early, like my college days, early career. I came from what you could call a poor dad. Again, super. And if anyone's not familiar with the book, or to restate it, poor dad isn't like
poor dad, right?
Yeah, that's it. Isn't that poor dad is not positive and not hardworking. It's very actually hardworking, but not necessarily thinking in a systems way, thinking like, if I just do more hours and make more income, right, and maybe get some promotions, then I'll be wealthy. Whereas his rich dad, and this is also more of a parable of a book than a true story, but that his rich dad taught him how was a big businessman, had multiple businesses, multiple streams of income, and got to spend much more time with his family and things like that, right? So growing up with that poor dad mentality and trying to change that, I said, this community is actually really valuable. Like, these are people that have had the same problems I'm having, know how to approach it, know what to watch out for. And so for the next couple of years, we actually met at the Chandler Crown Plaza in downtown Chandler, booked out the boardroom there, had 5-6 couples each year, and had just a lot of fun, building this call it community, but it's nothing where there were dues or anything like that. But and usually it was like friends of friends kind of situation, but just these other couples that are also trying to better themselves. And then continue to grow this, and so for the next year we actually went up to Flagstaff. So going back to that, get out of your everyday, even getting out of the valley, we went to Flagstaff, rented this huge Airbnb cabin, and also had another great time. Also, one of the couples that came up, one of the businesses they owned, they're serial entrepreneurs, was a party bus company. So we actually took one of their party buses, negotiated kind of for covering the costs and everything, to take their party bus up to Flagstaff. So we actually got all that time there and all that time back as a group. And so just building this community, building in companies, people that had a company over here, like, do you do this? Oh, I need one of those, right? And so if it's not something that they did themselves, because this isn't a huge network, but they knew someone, right? There's always someone that knows someone.
Yep.
That can solve your problems. And so went to Flagstaff. And then I guess along the way, we've also kind of refined, covering all these different life areas. And so we have what we call the 6 F's. And so, I've got them down because they can kind of jump on me. But the first F is faith and mindset, right? And so, are we living out our faith as we believe? Do our habits support a healthy mindset? I'm obviously not going to tell anyone what to believe or what that might look like, but for whatever practice that is, are we doing it? And also, are we in a good mental space, right? Like, do we have a lot of anxieties? Do we, whether it's something that can be corrected or coached or talked through with a professional, are we in a good space there? Because if you don't have that good foundation and you're not thinking positively and abundantly and believing yourself and having a partner that believes in you, then it's hard to build from, right? So that
for sure, that's clearly the first and most important F.
Faith and mindset. Next, obviously, as we're talking about a lot of wealth generation and things, is finance, career, and business. And this is going to look different for everyone. And I'm not going to say that, you have to go entrepreneurial, you have to go W-2, you have to do this or that. I think it's actually a split amongst those, right? We want to have multiple income streams. Having been laid off before and having laid off people before, you can't be reliant on a W-2, but also most businesses are going to fail. So have a little bit of each. And so I've got small business, I've got a W-2, we've got rental income, and at different times, each of those have been strong and each of those have been terrible situationally, right?
Okay.
And so having that diversity of your income sources and also balance, right? Even if whether you're building a business or building a career, are you also taking the time with your family and for your health and things that you're not burning yourself out?
Right.
Kind of on that burnout bit, and that also ties into the faith and mindset, and also kind of goes into this next one, fitness and health, right? Even if we're super good on finances, whether inherited, career, business, whatever that looks like, but we don't have the health to, one, live long enough to spend it, or two, to be able to be healthy enough to I'm gonna make this much money, build up this much of a nest egg, this much equity or something, this much cash flow, and then I'm just going to travel the world. Well, if you're reliant on a lot of medications, or if you're not physically able to be mobile, you're not going to be able to get to a lot of those places, or a lot of parts of the world won't be able to support you with that medication or different things. And so that fitness and health obviously is huge. Obviously, coming from a military background, doing PT, right? Physical training was a big part of that career, doing physical fitness tests multiple times a year. And now having my kids be in different programs and activities, whether it's backpacking with the Scouts or going to my son's track meets, it's something we still keep at a forefront. Up next, friends and community, right? We talked a little bit about community. No one is going to make it alone, whether in their career, their business, real estate. Having that team, having a community of people, and not just that always supports you, but that in doing so can sometimes tell you when you're maybe getting off course, right? That accountability is a big part of what we do. Obviously, having accountability with your partner is great, but they also have to hop into bed with you at the end of the day and not have resentment. And so sometimes there's hesitation to give that some of that constructive criticism, whereas everyone should have that good buddy that says, hey, like, you're getting off course, you're being kind of stupid right now, right? And give you that reinforcement, whether harsh or loving, to keep you on track for what you ultimately want to do.
Right.
Next is family, right? So we talked about our kids a little bit. We talked, and this is both as a couple, and then again your kids, and also your greater family. Like, what's the relationship like with our parents? Do we want that to go in one way or another? Are our parents maybe getting old and might have to move in with us or move into a home, or what does that look like? Are we spending proper time with our children, our activities, our marriage? Are we making sure that we're intentional, that maybe at least once a month, if not every other week or every weekend, that we have a date night to just keep up to date on what's going on? And then the last one, and this is both an individual F as well as kind of surrounding all the others, is freedom, right? And so if you don't have, a good income or multiple streams of income, you might not have the freedom to take time off if something happens. If you don't have, we talked a little bit about being healthy enough to do things, let alone, if you can't leave the country or things, because obviously the least amount of freedom is maybe being in jail or something. But even for the 99% of the population that isn't, that you have the capacity to do it, right? You're not overburdened by trying to run a business and have too many manual processes to be able to do that. And that, friends and community, like if my wife and I have something, I guess one of the best measures I like to bring up for people with this one is if you got a call at 2 a.m. and you and or your wife had to immediately go somewhere, do you have someone that could watch your kids, feed your dog, right? If you don't have that, then you know where to focus some of that energy going forward. Like start going to meetups, going to clubs, activities that you might be interested in, and meet some people and just start building those relationships. And it does take work. And my wife and I are both what I would consider introverts. I'm a little bit more of an extroverted introvert, whereas she's what we call non-people-y. And so it does take a lot of effort to do that sometimes, but we've seen just so much value from the time that we invest in growing those relationships and growing with others. Sure.
That brings up a question I had for you is that couples often assume that working together will automatically bring them closer. Yeah. What challenges have you encountered, right? Mixing marriage and entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Both in entrepreneurship and for a little while as in our careers, for about 3 years, kind of earlier in our marriage when my son was 1 to 3 or so, we actually both worked for the same company. not on the same team and not in a reporting relationship. We both worked in HR for the same company. And kind of talking about putting all your eggs in one basket, that company was impacted by oil prices at the time. And so my entire team was let go, and she was forced to go from full-time to contract status. And so we were heavily impacted there. Obviously, a lot of benefits interpersonally for us, like we got to go get lunch together almost every day, or if we brought it in, eat lunch together. We got to, if we were having office chit chat or talking about how someone's being annoying, like we knew who the other person was talking about, right? But at the same time, there's that risk there. I think even on the entrepreneurship side, or whether you're aligned on so with all of our real estate, I'm essentially the CEO, the COO. But she has veto authority on everything, right? As the board, essentially. And she's also kind of our chief risk officer, because she's the one that's going to say, like, oh, okay, what about this? What if this happens? And she's great at that. And sometimes it's, okay, well, that we have insurance for, or that, is kind of might be calculated in, like the maximum damage that can do is this, whether financially or for the property or something. And so she's kind of that CRO / board that can veto everything. And we have that kind of delineation of responsibilities. And that's something that has also evolved over time. Just like people might have different responsibilities in your household, like who does the dishes, who cooks, who tucks the kids in. Similarly for real estate or entrepreneurship, you need to have that. And so you have to have that conversation, right? If you're both stumbling over each other to get the same thing done, or you both assume something's being done and neither of you are doing it, then you're going to run into issues. And so just constantly communicating, laying that out. You don't have to do it like you might need to in a large company where it's documented and this person has this and the SLA is this and the KPI is this, but just having the conversation of who's responsible, how do we make decisions? It's like any other partnership that you might have even with an unrelated person in business, but that much more important that it survives and is working. Because even when say it's an entrepreneurship, you leave the store, you go home, like you're still with your business partner, right? You have to have dinner with your business partner. You have to wake up with your business partner.
Yep.
So that communication becomes that much more critical.
Okay. So you organically grew the retreats and started including other people and created Epic Couples, which you now have one retreat a year. Is that right?
Yeah, currently doing one retreat a year. We're considering, and I think one of our goals for next year is to also have a mid-year, like a mid-year check-in / summer vacation, right? And there's certain other there's other organizations that do similar, but we were talking a little bit about our families before the call, and I think bringing in the kids, there's a lot of value to it. It can be very distracting, right? And so for something where you're trying to be very deliberate about setting goals and then getting into the finances, getting into things that the kids don't necessarily need to be aware of. But I think also using something like this, like a summer retreat, a summer getaway / mid-year check-in, where you spend less time setting goals, you're doing an alignment to make sure you're on track, maybe readjusting as necessary, learning a couple new tools and things. You're also just having time as a family, and you're getting to take that time with the breadth of people you have in an event like this to show them what other successful people look like and how other successful families work, because they might not have that exposure at school. A lot of people just have their parents have a 9 to 5 and they come home and turn on the TV and then go back to school and work the next day, right? And also being able to do like a junior entrepreneurship class with the kids. And obviously, depending on ages, certain things have to be taught certain ways. Being a Cub Scout Cub Master, I've got a little exposure to that, but doing that as a family, I think, is just really valuable. So the kids even get to see you interacting with other entrepreneur couples, and so that's definitely something we're looking at for summer 27. But yeah, going into that this winter, we're excited for definitely our biggest retreat ever, and definitely would like to take a minute on that.
Sure. How many couples?
Yeah, so we talked about going from the couch to San Diego to the Crown Plaza boardroom to a giant cabin. So for 2026, it's November 29th to December 5th. We're actually going to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. My wife and I are going to take 11 couples with us. And obviously going international is a big jump in the logistics, a little bit in cost, but again, with that abundance mindset and the getting out of the everyday, when you go to Cabo, like, you're out of the ordinary, right? Even for us in Phoenix, even if you're living and working in Scottsdale, being seafront views every morning, having professional chef make every meal, bartenders making your drinks in the evening, doing the kinds of excursions we're going to be doing. It breaks you out of the ordinary, and there's no alternative but to think abundantly. And so really looking forward to that. It's where we've had every year at our retreats, we have what we call an abundant night out. And obviously being in Cabo, we're going to have nice food for every meal, from breakfast through dinner. But instead of just an abundant night out that we normally do on the evening of the last full day, since we're having a little bit more, drawing it out to 5 days instead of just 3, we're doing an abundant day out. And so we're going to be, on the water all day, little bit of kind of learning tools and a little bit of exercises there. But honestly, just a lot of time just enjoying each other, enjoying the water, fresh food and drinks. And so at the end of the day, like giving that space for each couple to, as a unit, have those conversations, but also to meet others that are in similar places. And maybe in some places, they can support the other. In some places, any of the other couples would be able to support you. Again, we've seen so much cooperation come from these events just organically, that it makes our job as the hosts super easy. Like we essentially create the environment, lead some of these discussions, but there's so much value that I've gained, and honestly, it's selfishly part of why I do it, is that community and each of these people. I've had sports medicine doctors, do some training with me as a takeaway from one of these things that have improved my health, right? And they were just there, a physician that attended with their partner. We've had local Phoenix social media stars attending and being able to apply some of what they do and they talk about and how to do things, and don't have the capacity or the need to do a lot of what that person does, but just really cool, diverse groups of people. And obviously also with only having 11 other couples, we can't allow everyone. So we do have an intake process where I'll have a conversation with either one person or the couple generally, and make sure that we are aligned, because I don't want to waste anyone's time to come and them not be comfortable with the caliber of people that they're surrounded by. And I also don't want anyone to be there that's going to detract from other people's experience, right?
Sure.
So I think it's fair to the guests that'll be there to do that process. And it's I'm not a very scary person. And at least I don't think so. But those conversations, help me learn a little bit about the couple, and then I also kind of steal some of those nuggets and build them into some of the surprises that we build into our events. So, which, short of becoming a Disney Imagineer, being able to build a lot of the kind of surprises along the way is a lot of fun.
Right. This is, I think in this day and age, everyone's so busy. We're always putting out fires that I think they just are not intentional about planning their future, right? Sometimes we spend more time planning a birthday party than we do our own future. So after hosting guests in the retreats for 6 years, or is it 6 years now?
Yeah, this will be our I guess 7th year.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, the first one was in 2020, right? So each year, we grow each time. Have a lot of fun with it, and definitely collected some stories along the way.
Right. So what transformation or breakthrough has stuck with you the most?
Yeah. I was talking with my wife last night about our conversation we'll be having today, and I've got a couple, and one she shared, and she said, even though it was nothing, this isn't wild. This isn't, we started making millions more dollars a year or something crazy. But it was in that second year where we, again, very deliberately went out to San Diego. We were on this rooftop, actually pool area, but it's the winter, so no one's in the pool. But very nice seating and everything, and had our tissues. And we're just getting very deep in conversation that she had been carrying a lot of mental load, and we kind of talked through it, and it was no big one thing. It was a lot of little things, and always having to worry. And kind of what came up was always having to worry about little things around the house, right? And kind of applying the freedom F. What that resulted in, because a lot of times people can get stuck in like, we want to lower costs and and make everything as efficient as possible. Sometimes spending more returns more to you. And so what that ended up with us doing was actually hiring a house cleaner, right? So spending $300-400 a month to I think every week or every other week, come home to a clean house, not have to worry about all those little things about cleaning baseboards and cleaning windows and things. Because between the real estate and corporate and our volunteering that we do, then having to, on top of that, take the time to do those things, and our kids still have chores. Don't worry, they're not getting away too easy with everything. That we were losing that time as a family, right? Instead of going out to a park or a show or something, we were, scrubbing baseboards, cleaning windows, doing that work. So that, as simple as it is, and again, growing up, before I was, probably 30 or so myself, I would have never even considered that. Like growing up, normal people didn't have house cleaners, right? The Richie Rich and the Trumps and all these people that live in giant houses up on the hills in LA and things, they have house cleaners, they have maids and all these different service providers. The normal people can't do that. But for about or even less than a car payment, that the comfort to always have a clean home was just life-changing.
Right. It's not always simply return on your time, right? Anything below your hourly rate should be outsourced. Sometimes there's exceptions on both sides of that. Jocko Willink likes to say discipline equals freedom, right? And so how do you know when discipline and productivity are helping your family and when it's crowding out connection?
Yeah. And it's one of those things where it can be hard to tell, especially from the outside, where you have to really start talking to people, asking, because everyone's going to have different thresholds for how much people time they need, how much they want to get something done within a certain amount of time. And so it's all about finding that balance. And it's not going to look the same for everyone. Jocko's really big on habits, right? And so some of it's just building in those habits, whether it's, say it's for real estate, it might be, hey, every day I'm going to see what new properties came on the market that are in my buy box, and I'm going to run one of them. Or maybe it's once a week, I run 5, whatever that might look like based on your timing and what you're trying to do that year. Similarly, on and that's, life has to be balanced across these 6 areas. When it comes to freedom and time with friends in our community, we have to make habits around that. So, we've set, one of our big habits every year is we host a murder mystery party. We've done this for 4 years now, where we invite probably 20 couples. And it's a great time. Only one person has died each year. But we continue to grow our community, our friendships. Oftentimes, people ask if they can bring someone and they come in and they become an amazing friend and resource and someone that we can give to, and they can watch the kids, when that 2:00 call shows up. And so it's being deliberate and finding, you have your goals, right? And this is something we walked through in the retreat, but you've got your goals, and then it's your habits that get you there. And so, yeah, you can have a goal to buy a 100-unit property, but that doesn't just happen, right? You have to go way back and say, okay, first, for Q1, I'm just going to screen properties, 5 properties a week, every week until we get an offer in. By Q2, have to have an offer in, because then if those things fall back, you have to have all this built out, your what ifs, your contingencies. But it's ultimately, as Jocko and others are very big on, it's those habits that make you who you are for each of these Fs.
Right. Okay. Well, this is all great stuff. Having a lot of impact in your community and relationships and families. Great values. Where can people go to learn more about your Epic Couples and upcoming retreat?
Yeah, so we've got a website at www.epiccouples.com. And for the retreat specifically, there's a link from the main page there, or epiccouples.com/retreat. And I guess anyone that is a listener of yours, you'll go in, you'll request time to have a talk with me, just like we talked about. And there's going to be are there any notes, anything we need to know? If they just drop in that they listen to your podcast, we'll take off $500.
All right, sweet little bonus. All right, so Vince, if people like to connect with you personally outside of that, maybe they're interested in Mathis Properties. I don't know. How do you recommend they reach out to you directly?
Yeah, so you can find me on social media, either through Epic Couples, PHX Epic Couples on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, Vince Mathis. I look like this. And also the Mathis Dad on Instagram is my personal, and I'm very open to connecting with just about anybody. So I'd love to connect, whether you're looking at the retreat or whether you have a question on real estate. Again, I've done a bit with that. I've learned a lot of hard lessons the hard way, and also had a lot of gains and value and partnerships. So if I can't do it, or I haven't done it before, I could probably connect you with someone who can.
All right. Well, this has been great. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Thank you very much, Vince Mathis, for joining me today. Very much appreciate you sharing your story and your epic couples endeavor. Great
Awesome
stuff.
Inspired by our guests? Visit phoenixprosperitypodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.